Chapter 11, To Buy a Saber. The next morning, Yang Tian drove to the high alert area outside of Tianxiang City. Within the city, the environment was that of complete peace and serenity. The citizens were living a productive life no different from the age before the virus outbreak. The only difference was that areas of activities had been downsized, and no one was able to leave the city at will. As for the high alert area outside, it was an orderless world of chaos. As long as one is a powerful person, he could literally get away with murder. The city authorities would not investigate. Yang Tian came here to sell the 2 grade 1 beast cores he obtained so that he could purchase some much needed gear. Yang Tian's grandfather was a class 1 warrior who left behind a good amount of fine gear. Yang Tian's parents sold them, partly in exchange for living expenses, and the rest, to pay management fees to the city. If it was not for that, Yang Tian's family would have been 10 times worse off than they were then. He may not even be able to attend high school. Yang Tian felt that the pair of alloy daggers that his grandfather left behind did not have the kind of control he was looking for when fighting monsters. During the battle with Tank Lizard, for example, he would only have to give a single blow to cause a fatal wound which could have avoided all the subsequent troubles. Things were quite out of the ordinary in the high alert area. Surrounding the 100-meter-high city walls were various tents occupied by adventurers who were traveling outside the city, as well as normal folks who lived there. By living in tents, they could conveniently relocate when monsters made spontaneous attacks. Moreover, it was cheaper to purchase a new tent if it was destroyed. Yang Tian drove around the outer rim of the high alert area and found a big green tent. He saw a big black banner across the tent with large, unskillfully written white letters that read, "Buying and selling beast cores, weapons for sale, best price," with the exclamation mark at the end being the largest of them all. Next to the big tent were little tents that were closed during daytime. Yang Tian drove to the entrance of the big tent, took out his backpack, locked the car, and swiftly headed in. As he was about to enter the tent, one of the little tents next to it opened up. Out came a big guy in a black singlet holding up his trousers. Behind him was a yawning woman in a sleeping gown. "Sir, please come again," she said to him. The big guy turned around with a chuckle and waved his hand at the woman. Yang Tian only gave them a quick look before he drew the curtain open and entered the big tent. The big tent was an actually small-scale weapons market. As Yang Tian entered the place, all he could see were guns of all kinds, everything from pistols to powerful sniper rifles, and even a Gatling gun. Other than guns, they also had electric grenades of different sizes and shapes. These were weapons used by normal folks, which during a real battle with monsters, would not do much. Only group assaults were useful in such situations. The reason being, guns required large amounts of backup ammo. As soon as bullets were fired, they would be as good as pieces of useless metal. Besides, for these fast-moving monsters who had skin as thick as armor, normal bullets would not do much damage. The warriors preferred various kinds of alloy sabers instead. Alloy sabers that were produced in this era were very different from those used by Yang Tian's grandfather. New alloy weapons were fused with an element called YT that were taken from the monster's bones, which greatly raised the quality of alloy weapons. Regular alloy blades could not compare in terms of both hardness and flexibility. Yang Tian would very much like to have owned one of these YT alloy sabers, which is what they were called, but he was not sure if the 1 million Wu from selling the 2 grade 1 beast cores would allow him to purchase a blade like that. Other than guns, the largest number of items displayed on shelf were alloy sabers. As Yang Tian went up to look at the blades, a short-haired man in camouflage came over. He smiled and asked, "My brother, would you like to sell or buy? We sell with the cheapest price in the area. Do you buy beast cores?" Yang Tian was very straightforward. Hearing that, the short-haired man was slightly stunned. He went on to ask with a smile, "Of course. It's written outside." Following the rules, we buy grade 1 beast core for 500,000 Wu each. We can pay cash, or do a bank transfer. He only mentioned the going rate for grade 1 beast core because he did not think a young man like Yang Tian could have possessed anything more than that. I'd like to sell too. Bank transfer please. Yang Tian nodded. The guy could not help his eyes from widening. He's got two of those. This is big business. As soon as he snapped back to reality, he dragged Yang Tian toward the counter while saying, according to the rules of our shop, if the first transaction is $1 million or above, you'll immediately become our VIP member. Everything that you buy in the future will be 20% off. As he was speaking, he brought Yang Tian to the counter. There was a beautiful woman with long hair who had an incredible figure. She winked at Yang Tian as he arrived at the counter. Yang Tian took off his backpack and presented 2 grade 1 monster cores together with his bank card. He knew that doing business in a high alert area was safe as people were mostly very honest and fraudulent activities seldom happened, especially toward high-end customers. Someone like Yang Tian, who could come up with 2 grade 1 beast core at once in exchange for $1 million Wu, was considered high-end. Behind the counter, the beautiful woman picked up the phone and made a call. After picking up the 2 beast cores to make sure they were genuine, the short-haired guy nodded at her. The woman took Yang Tian's bank card and started the transferring process on the computer. Soon after, Yang Tian received a text message from the bank on his cell phone, indicating that he had received the transfer of 1 million Wu. Yang Tian then went online with his phone to check his bank account. After making sure everything was settled, he nodded his head with joy. Bro, nice doing business with you. If there are more opportunities like this, please don't forget to take care of us. As soon as he said that, he winked at Yang Tian, walked his side, and whispered, "This beautiful lady is yours tonight." Yang Tian shook his head with a smile and asked, "I would like to purchase a YT alloy saber. Do you guys have it?" "Why, of course we do. But we only have one because there aren't many people who can afford to use this weapon." "Please give me a second," the guy quickly answered. He went behind the counter and pulled out a long rectangular case from below. Upon opening the case, he lifted a long saber in a black sheath. "YT alloy Tang Dao 1 million Wu. And a 20% discount for you, our VIP. That makes it 800,000, the short-haired guy said after handing the blade to Yang Tian. At this moment, the beautiful woman behind the counter had processed Yang Tian's VIP card and passed it to him. Yang Tian knew that there was no point bargaining, so he agreed to the price. He held the sheath on one hand and gripped the handle on another to pull the blade out carefully. The saber was white as snow, and smooth on the surface but not reflective, like animal bone. Because of the blade's high density, it felt heavy in the hand. Yang Tian estimated it to be at least 20 kilograms. Normal people would not last long swinging a weapon this heavy. As Yang Tian unsheathed the saber, he reached out to pull a strand of hair from the woman and placed it on the edge, and the hair immediately broke into two. This weapon was even sharper than the legendary weapons that were said to break hair with a blow of air. This Tang Dao was 70 centimeters in length, its handle was 25 centimeters long, and its width about 3.5 centimeters. Yang Tian took a few swings and was very impressed. Chapter 12, Warrior Mate. It took 800,000 Wu to buy a suitable weapon. Yang Tian finally understood, becoming a warrior was also an occupation that required a lot of money to build up. Fortunately, warriors could keep hunting monsters to obtain beast cores in exchange for monetary rewards so that they could buy what they need, plus be able to send some to their family to live a good life. Of the remaining 200,000 Wu, Yang Tian was planning to wire 50,000 to his parents while keeping 150,000 for his own use. What else to buy? Yang Tian knew very well that money was redundant. It was only useful if you turned them into gear, as they may be of incredible help during extraordinary situations. As Yang Tian pondered, the short-haired guy guessed what he was thinking. He leaned over and asked, "Bro, are you still looking to buy more stuff?" Yang Tian nodded. Rubbing his chin, the guy scanned through everything Yang Tian was carrying and nodded. "Bro, you'll need a warrior maid," he said. "Warrior maid?" Yang Tian asked in perplexity. Never in his life had he heard of such a thing. The short-haired guy smiled and said, "Although the YS outbreak happened when technology was developing rapidly and humans had no choice but to focus on fighting monsters instead, some technologies have still been progressing at full speed. For example, telecommunications and electronic engineering. Warrior Mate is a piece of multi-purpose equipment specially designed for warriors. It looks just like a wristwatch and has many functions that would assist you. Just a minute, let me show you." As he was speaking, he went behind the counter. When he bent down, he casually touched the beautiful woman's thigh, and then pulled out another case as she rolled her eyes. Placing a case the size of a handbag onto the counter, he pressed on the lock to open it, lifted the cover, and took out a beautifully packaged card box. The card box was blue, and printed on it was something that looked very much like a wristwatch together with the words Warrior Mate. He then opened the card box and took out a black-colored wristwatch. Warrior Mate was developed based on an individual contact system. It has magnificent functions such as sensing and calculating temperature, humidity, and oxygen level of your surroundings. It also works as a guidance system. It projects very strong comm signals so that you can stay connected even in very rural areas. And these, my friend, are only the basic functions. Seeing that Yang Tian was not very psyched about it, he knew that his introduction had not yet attracted his attention. Hence, he paused, and continued with a chuckle, "Bro, Warrior Mate is connected real-time with the Warriors Alliance websites around the globe. There are many combat skills you can purchase. Upon your purchase, with its magnificent real-time transfer ability, it'll download the combat skills method into the Warrior Mate so the user can watch and learn anytime he wants." Yang Tian's eyes were shining as he heard what the short-haired guy said. He understood this was what Yang Tian was really interested in. It was true. Yang Tian had no interest whatsoever toward real-time communication, direction guides, or temperature sensors, but combat skills. That was the most attractive thing to him. Currently, Yang Tian was only considered a transhuman but not yet a true warrior. Transhumans, after being transmutated by Beast Core, had physical abilities that were better than normal folks. Even so, truth be told, a physical state like that meant that the power of Beast Core had not been completely digested and absorbed. Warriors were transhumans who practiced combat skills. Through special training methods, they learned how to utilize their transmutated potential to the maximum. Combat skills could also help unleash one's power more efficiently. It was similar to the difference between normal people and martial artists. The two had similar physiques, but martial artists could easily defeat a normal person who did not study it. 1. How much is a warrior mate like this? After some thoughts, Yang Tian decided to get one, so he asked anxiously. The short-haired guy did not tell him the price right away, and instead he said, "Bro, don't be hasty. I'm not done yet. Other than the ability to buy various combat skills, you can also obtain the latest info updates on monsters. You know, monsters evolve by the minute. Every once in a while, a new species would turn up. This helps the user to have more confidence if they ever run into those monsters. Oh, and when a warrior turns on his warrior mate while encountering a monster, it'll quickly remind the user the battle grading of the particular creature so that he's mentally prepared." He spat out a bunch of info at him as if he was really afraid that Yang Tian would stop his sales pitch. The more Yang Tian listened, the more he thought having this gear was a great advantage. If he could train with this high-tech gadget, it would be a lot more convenient for his journey. 80% of the warriors these days are using this high-tech gear. The price? Only 50,000 Wu. The short-haired guy finally revealed. Why so cheap? Yang Tian asked in disbelief. In his mind, a piece of gadget as high-tech as this had to cost an arm and a leg. He simply did not expect to hear that. The guy smiled and said, 50,000 Wu is not even close to the cost of this baby. The reason it's so cheap is because just like your cell phone, you'll have to pay a monthly fee which is a minimum of 10,000 Wu. By the way, when you purchase anything with it, you'll have to pay a 10% processing fee. Yang Tian understood right away. This thing was the combination of a cell phone and an online marketplace. Not only did it have a high monthly fee, but it also charged a percentage when buying stuff off it. It was literally tying a high-end group of users, the warriors, tightly onto Warrior Mate's online marketplace. A piece of high-tech electronic product like that would not cost more than a few 100,000 Wu. Even if they gave it to the warriors for free, they could break even their production cost within a year. This was a business with guaranteed returns. However, Yang Tian was not interested in finding out how much money an electronic developer like this could make. He quickly took out his bank card and passed it to the woman behind the counter and said with a smile, "Hey miss, I'm taking the Warrior Mate." After he paid, Yang Tian got his Warrior Mate. Inside the box was a manual which Yang Tian read through. He wore the watch-like Warrior Mate around his wrist and pressed down the on-off button. The little screen on it lit up. A soothing female-sounding voice spoke, "First-time user. Please press the input button. The mate will record your voice pattern. From now on, you are the only user. Please input your name and ID number. Yang Tian, ID number TX78645. Yang Tian quickly stated his ID info, then lifted his finger from the button. Then, the Warrior Mate started speaking again, "Information input, success. Thank you for supporting Galaxy Tech. Please do spend more time setting up your voice command." Warrior Mate was completely voice controlled, so it took a while to set up the voice command. Yang Tian kept the box into his backpack and said to the short-haired guy, "I guess that's all for now, bye." The guy nodded with a smile and saw Yang Tian out. He waved at him and said, "Please come again." After leaving the big tent, Yang Tian fired up the car engine. He did not leave the high alert area right away because he still had to pick up some other stuff. For example, some clothes to change and some canned food that were easy to carry and nutritious. Chapter 13, Saber Practicing. Yang Tian drove back to the small 5-story building. There were many like him, people who wandered and trained. Unlike him, however, most of them settled their temporary residences outside Tianxiang City in the high alert area. Yang Tian located himself in the area between the high alert area and danger zone. He started learning how to use the Warrior Mate as soon as he went upstairs. At that same moment, Drago emerged from Yang Tian's breast pocket and hopped onto his shoulder. It opened its eyes wide to look at the gadget around his wrist in full curiosity. Following the instructional manual and the smart guide in the Warrior Mate, Yang Tian spent about 2 hours inputting every voice command. He later took out his cell phone, turned it off, drew out the SIM card, and transferred it into the card slot of the Warrior Mate. Then, he took out and put on a Bluetooth earpiece from the product box. After putting in the SIM card and restarting the Warrior Mate, it said, "Thank you for using our high-tech product from Stellar Tech, Warrior Mate. You currently have operating system version 1.0. You would need to upgrade it to version 2.0. Upgrade fee, 1,000 Wu. What the hell?" Yang Tian could not help but curse out loud when he heard that. He did not expect this thing would still need to be upgraded. What if there are 3.0, or even 4.0 in the future? Does it cost that much as well? What a scam. Yang Tian felt like he got conned by purchasing this thing. "Alright, I'll just suck it up," he thought. Following instructions, he connected the system with his bank card and paid 1,000 Wu, then commanded, "Upgrade to version 2.0. It took about half an hour before the warrior mate had completely upgraded. Operating system version 2.0, compared to 1.0, showed significant improvements. Version 1.0 was a lot stiffer, but version 2.0 had become a lot more humanized and intelligent. Yang Tian thought it was worth the 1,000 he paid. Master, I am number 100,001. You can give me another name. I'm glad to be at your service. Since Yang Tian was wearing the earpiece, the AI started speaking into his ear as soon as the upgrade was completed. It was the voice of a young lady, crisp and gentle. I guess I'll call you Blackie then. He looked at the black-colored warrior mate and said without giving much thought. After that, Yang Tian connected Blackie to the Warriors Alliance website and went into the combat skills purchasing page. Following instructions from Blackie, Yang Tian removed warrior mate from his wrist, closed his windows, and placed it on his tea table. A beam of light projected onto the white wall from the warrior mate and formed a very clear display image. There were many combat skills to choose from. After browsing through them, Yang Tian chose a skill called Shadow Break, which was a set of blade forms suitable for beginners. There was currently a little more than 100,000 Wu in Yang Tian's bank card. If excluding the 50,000 he wanted to send to his parents, there were less than 50,000 left to be used. Fortunately, this basic combat skill only cost a mere 20,000 Wu. With the 10% processing fee added on, Yang Tian paid 22,000 Wu to have it downloaded into his warrior mate. Yang Tian took no time to log off the Warriors Alliance website as soon as he made his purchase so that he could watch the Shadow Break tutorial video. The video was very long. He started at noon and finished by night time. He checked the watch after the video had turned off, and it was already 8 p.m. Transfer 50,000 Wu to my father's card. The bank card number is, Yang Tian instructed Blackie, and the money was transferred to his father's account. After the transaction, he had Blackie call up his family's landline to make sure his father received the transfer notification from the bank. His parents then nagged him for some time before they hung up the phone. After talking to his parents, Yang Tian called up Qin Fei and the two exchanged words of love for quite a while. He realized that ever since Qin Fei took the courage to kiss him, their relationship had progressed a great deal. Yang Tian knew that by the time they saw each other again, it probably would have taken another step forward. Yang Tian wore a silly smile on his face for quite a moment after they hung up. Squeak squeak squeak. When Yang Tian finally finished all his tasks, the little green dragon made noise to announce his presence. Yang Tian could hear the tone of dissatisfaction from his squeaking. It's not that I was ignoring you, I really had a bunch of things to do. I bought some raw beef. I'll grill them for you in a minute, okay? As soon as he heard grilled meat, Drago squeaked joyfully and hopped onto Yang Tian's shoulder, rubbing his head against his face affectionately. 6 a.m., at the crack of dawn. Yang Tian rose from his sleep. After washing up with river water, he ate a can of beef and went downstairs with his Tang Dao. Drago jumped up to his shoulder. Yang Tian realized that this little creature was really thoughtful because every time there were outsiders, he would hide so that people could not see him. In fact, that was what Yang Tian had been hoping for, to keep Drago a secret weapon. Especially during fierce battles in the future, Drago could appear out of the blue to make a fatal blow. The enemies that warriors faced in this world were sometimes not only monsters but also humans as well. Much like his encounter with Wang Wei previously, who tried to murder him to get his hands on the Grade 2 beast core. Yang Tian went to the first floor. The first floor used to be a storefront and had a big empty space. After some cleaning, it could become Yang Tian's training ground. After spending about an hour cleaning, the floor was spotless, and Yang Tian started to practice Shadow Break. The first floor had rolled up doors. Once pulled, the room became dim. Yang Tian took off his warrior mate and turned on the projecting function. He started practicing while watching the explanations. Shadow break was a basic combat skill, so it was not too difficult. With continuous practice, it would exercise most muscles in the body, thus initiating the ability to control one's physical power. On top of that, this set of forms came with a specific breathing method. To practice the forms with it, it could trigger physical potentials at the highest level. Yang Tian thought he might not have remembered much just by watching the tutorial video once yesterday afternoon, which was why he turned it on during practice. Much to his surprise, he realized that his memory served him very well when he started practicing. Following the beginning of his movements, the memory of the saber method started flowing out of his mind like spring. He could perform the entire form at his first try. Even though it could still flow better, the practice session went smoothly. If the inventor of Shadow Break was to see Yang Tian performing the form so well at first try, he would have been very shocked. He was not only surprised by this. He also realized that practicing the saber form with a certain breathing frequency allowed him to feel warm all over the body. It simply felt like he had unlimited strength in his body, like a flow of energy circulating within. The tutorial video took a few hours to reach the end. As the warrior who was demonstrating had to pause once in a while to explain certain crucial transitions, and on top of that, some movements required a few repetitions. Nevertheless, once learned, the entire set of blade forms only took half an hour to perform. If the movements were sped up through time, it could even be completed within a few minutes. When Yang Tian finished running through the form the second time, he felt that practicing indoors in a confined space could not satisfy him. Nature is the best teacher. Yang Tian suddenly recalled the advice from Qin Fei's grandfather, Qin Zhenyang. Drago, let's go. Let's practice outside. Yang Tian smiled at Drago. He turned off the warrior made projection, put it back on his wrist, and walked toward the staircase. Drago squealed with joy and jumped up on his shoulder. Hiss. 1 hour later, in the woods outside of Huangqiu City, Yang Tian moved his body swiftly. The saber in his hand turned into sheets of white light, its friction with the air produced hissing sounds. Drago was up on a tree, and his claws kept scratching on the tree branches, pulling leaves off. The leaves caught the air current and flowed toward Yang Tian, who was practicing his saber. Some of these falling leaves had been sliced half by Yang Tian's blade. A long moment later, Yang Tian sheathed his saber and exhaled. Drago, pull out fewer leaves next time, will you? My saber is not fast enough yet, Yang Tian told him with a light pant. Squeak squeak. Drago answered. Chapter 14, Monster's Wave. 6 p.m. Yang Tian dragged himself back to the little 5-story building, feeling exhausted. Drago, on the other hand, was full of energy, sitting on Yang Tian's shoulder with big wide eyes, staring at the 2 plastic bags he pulled out from his trunk that was full of fresh meat. Inside the bags were meat Yang Tian obtained from a silver boar that he killed in a chance encounter when he was practicing. Unfortunately, the silver boar was a low-level monster below grade 1, so it did not have a beast core inside its head. Back at the building, Yang Tian fought hard with his tiredness as he cut the boar meat into tiny cubes, spread some seasoning on it, and skewered them with an iron stick. Once they were grilled, he fed Drago. Yang Tian did not understand why this little creature loved eating grilled meat so much. He was already bored of it after eating them for 2 days straight and felt that it was not as good, but Drago did not seem to lose interest at all. After feeding the little green dragon and taking a shower, Yang Tian told him to be more alert at night. He then held his saber against his chest and fell asleep within minutes. He was not sure how much time had passed when he heard squeaks and a long, low rumble. He opened his eyes wide and alert. Yang Tian saw Drago, who was crouching on the headboard, listening to the rumble from outside that reminded him of a stampede of running horses. He was stunned and threw himself off the bed. He put on his clothes and went to the window with his saber, carefully drawing the curtains open and looking outside. It was a night with a bright silver moon, so everything outside could be seen rather clearly. Yang Tian saw a huge number of monsters under the moonlight, running through the streets outside headed toward Tianxiang City. Monster wave. These two words flashed in Yang Tian's mind. It had been almost 100 years since the YS outbreak occurred, but in the decades since humans started living in the secured area, there would be a monster wave every once in a while. It was a phenomenon where a gigantic group of monsters attacked human cities. There was usually one small wave every 3 or 4 years, and a big one every 10 years. Watching the various kinds of monsters racing on the streets outside, Yang Tian's head felt numb. There were so many of them, even a high-class warrior may be drowned by them. The reason monster waves occurred had long been known by humans. Higher-grade monsters were as smart as humans, and they saw humans as their nemesis. Other than that, the monsters' reproduction rate was very high, so there would be cases of an overpopulation of monsters every few years. To make sure that their territories were safe from chaos, the higher-grade monsters would manipulate large groups of lower graders to launch suicide campaigns on human cities. It not only helped keep the number of low-grade monsters in control, they also used this opportunity to lower the humans' resources. This strategy was akin to killing two birds with one stone. The launch of a monster wave was lightning swift and usually only gave humans a mere few hours to prepare. As orders were handed down in monster territories, numerous monsters would gather within 1 to 2 hours and rush toward human cities. After glancing out the window, Yang Tian carefully lowered his window curtain and clutched onto his saber. He sat cross-legged under the window and waited quietly. It was not the time to confront them. To be surrounded by that number of monsters could only mean death. Huangqiu City was only 50 kilometers from Tianxiang City. When the monsters arrived, people in the high alert area were most likely retreating into the city. The people in the city would use their 100-meter high wall as a shield, and launch a counter-attack against the monsters. The reason humans could be aware of and be prepared for a monster wave ahead of time was that there were space satellites they could rely on that watched the monsters' every move. It was not easy to see when they were scattered, but as they gathered, the satellite display would show a moving red patch. Every monster wave was an opportunity for the warriors to earn a fortune and show off their skills. Human cities were extremely sturdy. When the monsters came from under the wall, the high-energy weapons on top would lash them with destructive attacks. When the monsters were dispersed, it would be a party for the warriors. They would take the chance to flock out of the city to hunt and collect a handsome number of beast cores. The pack of low-grade monsters running outside had not noticed Yang Tian's presence, as they were most probably being rushed by the higher-grade monsters from behind. The only thing in their minds was to reach the city wall. Yang Tian kept clutching onto his blade, and lightly shut his eyes to wait for the monsters to pass. Then, it would be his chance. The passing of time felt extremely slow during the wait, and Yang Tian would raise his wrist to check the time every now and then. When Yang Tian was awakened by Draco, it was around 3 a.m. The monsters left Huangqiu City after half an hour. Still, Yang Tian did not make a move. Under the moonlight, the tents outside of Tianxiang City had all but disappeared. Under the 100-meter city wall were piles of garbage left behind. Those who dwelled in the high alert area were all let in behind the wall to seek shelter from this wave of monsters. Capacity was limited in a city. To protect the well-being of the majority, some people would have to be sacrificed. There was always a group of people like that outside every city. They were mostly people who were wandering after the YS outbreak and gathered around the city when they found one. Some, however, were those who broke the law in the city and exiled. There were also those, like Yang Tian, who were qualified to live in the city but refused to accept the life they had. They left the city to embark on adventures and training, hoping that they would become strong one day. Within a few decades, those who lived outside gave birth to their offsprings, and they grew in numbers enough to be compared with those living behind the city wall. With a population that large, if it were a different time, they could have taken over the entire city with just one rebellion. However, it was an age where monsters were rampant, an age where the warriors ruled. These people were a vulnerable group, and they had no basis to rebel, so they could only rely on the city to live on. As for the people in the city, people on the outside were also the providers of fresh produce that they ate, while the city provided them with medicines and weapons. When monster waves occurred, city management allowed them to seek shelter in the city. However, they were definitely not allowed to stay in there for too long to avoid disorder. The city people had their very own perspective towards systems. The city was safe, and most people possessed a clear sense of obedience to the law. On the other hand, those outside the city were folks with a strong emphasis on strength and power. They could kill a person simply over a verbal argument. 10 odd minutes after Yang Tian woke up, the monsters were closing in on Tianxiang City. This was a small-scale attack, and it occurred on the east side of Tianxiang City. From the looks of the satellite display, there were an estimated few million monsters. Shots started to go off before they got close to the wall. Laser cannons babbling, regular speed fire bombers booming, high-powered automatic weapons clicking away, and electric grenades exploded with sizzles. All these different noises disrupted the quiet night. Laser, electro-optic light, and fire lit up the dark sky. Even though he was 50 kilometers away, these lights could still shine through the window, flickering on Yang Tian's face. Outside Tianxiang City, packs of low-grade monsters braved bullets and explosions to charge toward the wall. They charged with extreme speed, and after losing only a small number, they reached the wall. The wall did not form a 90-degree angle with the ground, it was pointed outward. Monsters had to rely on their sharp claws to climb up. Even if they reached the top, there were still large-caliber machine guns that shoot horizontally, on top of high-voltage fences. The attack started at around 3 a.m., and yet, by 7 a.m., it was still ongoing. This was out of Tianxiang City management's expectations. From the decades of experience dealing with monster waves, attacks would usually last an hour or so. Monsters would usually disperse and leave after a small number of them were killed. However, this attack had been going on for more than 3 hours, and the low-grade monsters were still attacking in a suicidal manner. Many of them had gone up the wall. Although they would be electrocuted by the fences, or get shot at by the large-caliber guns, if the attack persisted, the monsters would very likely get behind the wall and cause tremendous harm to the citizens. Chapter 15, Fight. When the chief manager of Tianxiang City understood the situation, he announced an order for warriors to take action. At 7:15 a.m., Yang Tian received a notification through his warrior mate, ordering all registered warriors within Tianxiang City from Class 1 to Class 3 to leave the city to hunt for monsters. The order carried no weight toward Yang Tian because even though he studied combat skills, he had not been evaluated for warrior's class, thus was not yet considered a warrior. He could also smell something different through this order. Normally, the Tianxiang City management would not call out to warriors, unless it was an emergency situation. The monsters had long passed through Huangqiu City, they stomped on the streets and created even more potholes than before. The SUV that Yang Tian drove had already been knocked over to the side, so he was not sure if it still worked. "Drago, come on. Let's go out," said Yang Tian while held on tight to his saber and stood up. Squeak squeak. Drago squeaked happily as if he could not wait. After eating grilled meat for a few days, Drago showed quite a big change. His body became slightly larger and was not as thin as before. Yang Tian opened the door and rushed downstairs to the street. As the monsters just passed through, there was still a musty smell stirred by beast packs and the stench of body odor and monster droppings. Yang Tian rubbed his nose and quickly walked along the street toward Huangqiu City. Ow! Yang Tian only took a few steps when suddenly, a black iron whip tiger charged out from a side alley. It roared and jumped right at him. Iron whip tigers were very fast, and Yang Tian did not have the chance to unsheath his blade. Instead, he jumped to the side to avoid its attack. Although the monster pack had already passed by, some monsters stayed behind. Not all monsters were obedient to their superiors' orders. If they ran into some matters along the way and got separated from the pack, they would stay back. The iron whip tiger's attack missed Yang Tian. It then crouched down and confronted him with a cold stare. Excluding its tail, this iron whip tiger's body was at least 3 meters long, almost twice as big as a normal tiger. Its limbs were thick and surly, and its feet were wider than a big rice bowl. Its hook-like claws were at least 4 centimeters long, shining with a metallic reflection. Grade 1 iron whip tiger, speed 250, strength 280, attack 300, specializes on pouncing on its prey. Its tail attack is most unpredictable. Please beware, sir. Yang Tian's warrior mate scanned the tiger and compared it with the database and reported the chain of results to him. Yang Tian was not sure about his current speed, strength, and attack level, hence he was not able to judge his ability against the tigers. Nevertheless, the report still served a purpose. Without even having to battle with it, he learned about the iron whip tiger's strengths. Yang Tian drew his blade. Whoosh! All of a sudden, the iron whip tiger jumped at Yang Tian. Yang Tian did not retreat, and instead rushed toward the creature and suddenly squatted down, stabbing its abdomen with the saber. Pat! Yang Tian thought he could kill the iron whip tiger with that move, but he did not realize that its arm-thick tail would sweep downward, swatting his blade sideways. That swat was so strong that Yang Tian's entire arm went numb. The attack failed. Yang Tian turned over and stood back up. Taking the opportunity when the tiger just landed on the ground and was still facing the other way, he jumped up high, gripped his saber with both hands, and aimed the tip of the blade toward the creature's back with full strength. The iron whip tiger noticed his move. It pushed its limbs against the ground and leaped forward like lightning. Shriek! The saber poked right through the cement street surface and let out a sharp shriek. Yang Tian had not used his combat skills up to this point. He wanted to see if he could defeat the iron whip tiger without using combat skills but simply with his strength, speed, and the superior weapon that he was using. For him, it was a good chance to train. However, if he kept dragging on, he might lose a lot of energy, which was not going to be worth it. This thought popped into his head because there was still a big battle ahead waiting for him. He pulled out the blade while the creature turned around and charged at him once again. Shadow break! Yang Tian let out a soft cry and the blade in his hand instantly turned into a net of light, enveloping the iron whip tiger. Only yesterday did Yang Tian practice shadow break the whole day. He even asked for Drago's help to throw him leaves to practice his slicing speed. Even though it was only for a day, Yang Tian was already rather familiar with it. This saber skill worked exactly like its name, it broke shadows. The goal was to be as fast as possible to the point it could cut through light and shadows. Shing, shing, shing. A string of blade noises sounded rapidly. Yang Tian cruised under the iron whip tiger's body. Bam! The creature's huge body fell flat to the ground. The iron whip tiger groaned for a moment before it finally closed its eyes. Blood gushed out of its abdomen. Phew! Yang Tian took a long exhale and stood up with his blade sheathed. This was the power of combat skills. Once used, the blade would seem unpredictable. The iron whip tiger could not tell where Yang Tian was aiming for. Still a little inadequate, but more practice would fix the problem, said Yang Tian with a smile, looking at the body of the tiger while massaging his arm. Next, he broke open the creature's head with his saber. Sadly, the grade 1 beast core was nowhere to be found. This was normal because not all monsters had beast cores in their skulls. The chances to obtain the grade 1 beast cores, for example, were 1 in 100. If the monster's grades were higher, the probability of finding beast cores would be higher too. It only took around 2 minutes between Yang Tian's encounter with the Iron Whip Tiger and its defeat. After realizing the beast core was nowhere to be found, he continued his journey to Tianxiang City at full speed. After the monsters took this route toward Tianxiang City, the number of monsters increased. There were now some wounded monsters that came running back from there. Every few minutes, Yang Tian would encounter a monster. If they attacked, he would kill them. Otherwise, he would not engage. Those were mostly gradeless monsters. Not only that Yang Tian would get nothing out of them, he would even consume his energy in vain if he fought them. At that moment, an unexpected change was befalling Tianxiang City. Other than the monsters on the ground, a huge number of flying monsters had gathered together in the sky afar and were headed toward the city. If one stood on top of the Tianxiang City wall, one would witness a dark cloud moving over from afar. Woo! Air defense alert started wailing throughout Tianxiang City. Chapter 16, Perimeter Attack. In terms of species and population, aerial monsters were a minority compared to the terrestrials. There were less than 100 types of them, mostly consisting of hawks, some other birds of prey, and mammals such as bats. Red hawk had the largest population among them. The dark clouds that were moving toward the city were formed by tens of thousands of red hawks. The out-of-the-ordinary sight about the current monster wave was that they had both terrestrial and aerial attack coordinated. TCH. Before the Red Hawks arrived above Tianxiang City, the laser cannons in the city had already started attacking. Large beams aiming at the gigantic flock shot down many of the birds that possessed 6 to 7 meters wingspan, causing them to fall like raindrops. Very soon after, these ruthless beasts scattered themselves and charged at the city wall from above. The terrestrials had reached the top of the wall at the same time, and it was also the busiest time for the warriors at the wall. The Red Hawks' attack on the city wall simply made things more difficult for them. Fortunately, the warriors who received the notification kept rushing toward the wall, while civilians shut their doors and windows tightly to avoid the fatal attacks from the Hawks. Yang Tian ran 30 kilometers swiftly and stood on high ground to glance over at Tianxiang City. He could see countless monsters charging at the city wall non-stop. There were also a number of them receiving orders from the higher-graded monsters to run back and forth as if they were hyping up the atmosphere. Many of them clawed their way up along the leaning wall, and quite a few reached the top but were cut down by the warriors. The rapid cannons on top tirelessly fired shots at the beasts, blowing some of them into the air, or dismembering them to pieces, causing a rain of blood. Some bombs exploded with a strong electrical current that turned the creatures into a crisp, and fire bombs that blew up with fiery rain shrouded them, turning them into balls of flame, running and charging aimlessly with painful squeals. Other than those on the ground, the sky was covered with hovering gigantic hawks. They took turns to charge downward from time to time and were welcomed with bullets from large-gauge machine guns. The laser cannons in the city adjusted their angles as well, shooting down the birds one by one. That was the very first time that Yang Tian witnessed such a huge battle. It was more brutal than he could imagine. Up to that point, it was still humans who had the chance to do the slaying because they had the advantage of having a high city wall and the warriors fighting on it. The monsters could not get in easily. Yang Tian could only imagine the infernal sight if these frenzied creatures made their way behind the city wall. It was not that humans had not seen monsters breaking into their cities in the past decades. However, in those cases, no one other than the warriors could survive. Under normal circumstances, the monsters would have retreated in chaos with that number of casualties. This time, however, as soon as there were traces of a breakdown, there were higher-grade monsters that howled at them and put them back to their places to continue their attack. The monsters attacked without fear of death, and their numbers grew larger and larger on the wall. Yang Tian raised his wrist and saw that it was 8:20 a.m. on the warrior mate display. It had been more than 4 hours since the beginning of the assault. As soon as he lowered his arm, the warrior mate received a notification from the city management pleading for all warriors in the city to take action and for those who were outside the city to surround the monsters and hunt so that they could stir confusion within the enemies. It seemed like the situation had escalated. Once the order was made, the weapons on top of the wall stopped. Weapons like bombs, electric grenades, lasers, and large-gauge machine guns consumed massive amounts of energy, and it was not easy to refill. If the consumption was too high, it would affect the city defense. Seeing the number of monsters growing higher on top of the wall, Yang Tian began worrying for his parents. Qin Fei, his girlfriend, had a high-class warrior grandfather, so she was well protected, but what about his parents? They had no means to protect themselves when facing the beasts. The warriors on top had not come down from the wall because the ground was too crowded with monsters. Under the leadership of high-grade monsters, they attacked in strict order, causing a great momentum. If only someone could do something at that moment to muddy the waters, the warriors could reach the ground easier. The city management realized this fact. When the monster wave started, there were many warriors, probably more than 1,000 of them outside the city as well. Hence, Yang Tian was not the only one observing the situation from the outer perimeter. He looked around and saw many people with weapons in the distance. There had to be a good number of warriors among them. As long as they received orders from the city, the warriors could not disobey, as disobedience brought grave consequences. Drago, let's do this. With a chuckle, Yang Tian held his saber and took the lead to charge at the monsters below the wall. Many saw Yang Tian making his move and without hesitation, they followed suit with their weapons. Looking from above, one could see almost no one walking the streets in Tianxiang City. On the contrary, the top of the wall was crowded with people, especially the side where the monsters attacked. All one could see were black dots moving around. Under the wall, one could see nothing but darkness caused by densely populated monsters within a 10 kilometers range. That was a monster pack. Even though many were dead or wounded, the number of them still standing was terrifyingly high. Outside the monster pack, there were scattered black dots that were running full speed toward it. These black dots were warriors from outside the city. A true warrior should not only care about his own security, he had to care for his family as well as protecting the weak. That was the true warrior spirit. It might not mean much for a lot of warriors, but Yang Tian was in full agreement with it. If he could not care for his family and bully the weak, what difference was there between him and the monsters? Driven by the spirit, Yang Tian became the first person to charge at the monster pack. He was very fast and had arrived at the area where the monsters gathered in the blink of an eye. More than 10 black-backed wolves saw Yang Tian. Following a howl, they pounced at him. Even before studying combat skills, Yang Tian could kill a grade 1 silver-fanged wolf without a YT alloy saber, let alone now. Shadow break. Facing the wolves, Yang Tian growled deeply as his saber turned into a ball of light, directing it at a big one coming at him. Thud. In an instant, the sharp blade cut the creature into half. Right after the kill, Yang Tian stomped the ground and turned around, letting an attacking wolf pass by and sending his saber outward. With another thud, the weapon went straight into its waist. With a light twitch, it got cut open, releasing various organs and innards. Yang Tian managed to kill 2 monsters in just the blink of an eye. The monsters around were stunned by his action, and they surrounded him one after another. Yang Tian knew there was no time to hesitate. He had to move non-stop. He had to move like the monsters so that he would not be surrounded. Many of these monsters did not even have a grade. The largest number of them all were black-backed wolves who had not evolved into silver-fanged wolves. Other than that, there were also a sizable number of silver boars, red-clawed cats, red flame panthers. Yang Tian did not direct his attack route at the city wall because that area was most densely populated with monsters. It would be suicide to go there. On principle, he stayed on the outskirts of the monster pack and backed off swiftly if there were some closing in on him. The monsters directly in front of him would all be cut down by him. Within a few minutes, Yang Tian slew more than 20 of the creatures, and his body was covered in the enemy's blood. He was on high alert at that point and was observing his surroundings while dealing with the monsters that were pouncing at him. A little negligence would give the beasts a chance to surround him. He could easily die if nobody was around to help. Not far from him, the other warriors were using the same strategy of hunting on the outer rim of the pack. The air filled with battle cries from the warriors and squeals from the monsters. Chapter 17, Class 7 Warrior. Oh! Yang Tian had defeated yet another black-backed wolf when he saw a surly black wolf letting out a howl into the sky about 100 meters ahead of him. When the wolf opened its jaw, he could see two sharp, red-colored fangs. Grade 2 red-fanged wolf. Yang Tian's eyes widened. This creature was obviously the leader of these black-backed wolves. The howl was probably its order to attack Yang Tian. Without a moment of hesitation, he leaped toward the red-fanged wolf. He was not thinking of the likeliness of finding a grade 2 beast core but more to deprive the low-grade wolves of its commands. They might just disperse because of that. It was not like he had enough time to retrieve the beast core after he killed the creature amidst the chaos. Yang Tian kept chopping down his enemies and shortened his distance with the red-fanged wolf in just a brief moment. Right then, the warrior mate detected the wolf and let out a warning. Grade 2 red-fanged wolf, speed 500, strength 250, attack rate 400, poisonous red fangs. Sir, please be very careful, it is very fast. The beast soon noticed Yang Tian aiming at it. Baring its fangs at him, it let out another howl. The black-backed wolves around it heard the command and pounced at Yang Tian collectively. As for the red-fanged wolf, it slowly retreated and soon disappeared from Yang Tian's sight. What a cunning animal! He thought. Drago, finish him. Yang Tian ordered the little dragon hiding in his chest pocket when he realized the red-fanged wolf was trying to run away all the while swinging his saber, slicing away at the wolves that came at him from all directions. Drago had been poking his head out of the pocket to look at his surroundings with great curiosity. He sat patiently before Yang Tian gave him instructions, and awaited for his chance to join the action. As soon as Yang Tian commanded, Drago jumped out of his pocket like a green flash and left his sight in a split second. Drago was so fast that Yang Tian had not seen any monsters faster than him. At that moment, a black-backed wolf jumped at him. Yang Tian kicked it into the air, waved his blade upward and sliced it in half. Oh! Right then, the red-fanged wolf howled at the wolf pack ahead. This time, its tone was not as arrogant as before, and instead, sounded like it was in extreme pain. Upon hearing the cry, Yang Tian knew that Drago had started assaulting the creature. He ran toward the direction of the howl and, within a few breaths, he killed 3 black-backed wolves and kicked another 2. The rest of the pack turned around and ran away in different directions. The red-fanged wolf appeared before Yang Tian's eyes. The beast that was one size larger than the rest of his pack was rolling painfully on the ground. Drago was riding on its head and clawing away on its skull. The wolf's skin had already been broken into and blood spurted out, but it could not get rid of the little dragon that was riding on top. All it could do was roll and flip frantically, knocking its head against the hard ground, hoping to chase Drago away. Yang Tian saw what happened and quickly ran over and waved his saber downward, cutting the wolf into half and put it out of misery. Even then, Drago did not stop clawing at the wolf's skull. Yang Tian then understood there must be a grade 2 beast core inside this wolf's skull. Drago would have given up otherwise. Clutching his saber, Yang Tian looked around in alertness. Panic ensued within the monster pack under the city wall. After getting the monsters off the city wall, the warrior released ropes and slid down the city wall. It was not only lower-class warriors that were fighting, even the higher-class warriors joined in. Yang Tian saw an old gentleman with a thick-bodied saber. Every time he waved the weapon, he sent a few large monsters flying. The monsters around him could not get close to him, even though they pounced at him. There was another warrior who moved so gracefully with his pair of daggers, it was almost as if he turned into fragmented shadows. Everywhere he went, the monsters dropped. Other than melee weapons, there were also warriors who used guns. There was a tall and big shirtless warrior who held a large caliber Gatling gun which spat rapid long flames. Any monster that was in his way got sliced into pieces by the bullets. Once the city warriors got under the city wall outside, one could imagine the outcome of the battle. When the slaughter began, the monster pack could do nothing but to eventually break apart. Squeak squeak. At the same moment, Drago let out a joyful cry as he held onto a yellow beast core and hopped onto Yang Tian's shoulder. He presented the beast core to Yang Tian as if trying to please his master. Yang Tian took the beast core and stuck it into his side pocket casually. Once again, Drago went back into his master's shirt, hanging on his chest. The little creature knew when to hide, not wanting anybody else to see him. Yang Tian looked ahead and picked up his saber to continue his battle with the monsters. It was 12 p.m. The corpses of the monsters carpeted the ground within a 10 kilometers radius outside the Tianxiang city wall. Living monsters were nowhere to be seen. Yang Tian was soaked in the monster's blood, and the real color of his clothes had been completely covered. He was sitting down, propping his saber against the ground and breathing heavily. Finally, the wave was over. Next up was the cleaning of the battlefield. This was a harvesting opportunity for the warriors. There could be beast cores inside some of the corpses. Even if one found just one or two of them, the hard work was still worth it. There was an unwritten rule when it came to seeking beast cores, a rule that was cultivated throughout the past decades. The monsters' corpses had to be investigated by the higher class warriors before the others could make a move. Higher class warriors referred to those class 5 and above. There were around 100 of those warriors in the entire Tianxiang city. Of course, other than a few shameless high-classed warriors, no one among them would check on anything lower than grade 3. They would let lower-class warriors acquire grade 1 and grade 2 beast cores. Yang Tian knew of this rule, so he took his time to wait and rested in the meantime. Even though he was fighting on the outer rim, he was exhausted after the fierce battle. The higher class warriors were making their rounds on the huge battlefield while the lower class ones were eager to do the same once they left. Some were just sitting down to rest like Yang Tian. The battlefield was covered with dismembered bodies of the monsters. Internal organs were scattered everywhere, and the air smelled of blood stench and burnt monsters' flesh. It was a terrible smell, and anybody who was not used to being in this situation would probably vomit. An old gentleman in beast armor came over. On his chest was a gold pentagram. Pentagrams of this kind correspond to the color of beast cores. Grade 1 was white, grade 2 was yellow, grade 3 was red, grade 4 was green, grade 5 was light blue, grade 6 was dark blue, grade 7 was gold, grade 8 was purple, and grade 9 was multicolored. That meant this old gentleman was a class 7 warrior. Upon seeing the old man, Yang Tian stood up right away because it was Qin Fei's grandfather, Qin Zhenyang. Only then had Yang Tian realized that Qin Zhenyang was a class 7 warrior. Chapter 18, Grade 3 Beast Core. Grandpa Qin, you're here. Yang Tian scratched his head and stood up hastily when he saw Qin Zhenyang approach him. Not bad. It only took you a few days to buy all the gear. You looked confident when you were about to embark on your journey out here. I bet your grandfather left you some beast cores and you were already a transhuman, eh? Qin Zhenyang looked at the blood-soaked Yang Tian while nodding with a smile. Before Yang Tian could answer him, Qin Zhenyang continued, you ought to be careful out there. Come over to our place and visit little Fei when you come back. Yang Tian was slightly stunned hearing him say that. Okay. He nodded happily. Yang Tian knew that Grandpa Qin was showing him his early approval by saying that. After chatting a little while more with Yang Tian, Qin Zhenyang left. Looking at how Qin Zhenyang searched for upper-class monsters, Yang Tian wondered, since Grandpa Qin, who was Little Fei's grandfather, was a Class 7 warrior, and Little Fei's parents were both upper-class warriors, how come she did not transmutate and become a warrior? Was it similar to his situation, where her family did not wish to see her carrying the heavy burden of being a warrior, who, out of obligation, had to hunt monsters outside the city? After becoming a warrior, one was expected to fight the monsters outside during a monster wave such as the one they just had, and one could die over a slight oversight. The warrior's safety was not guaranteed. During the battle that had just occurred, there were quite a large number of warriors, especially lesser-class warriors, who were killed by higher-grade monsters. Fortunately, those who fought on the outer rim like Yang Tian did not get hurt as much. Yang Tian could not figure out the answer. He shook his head and continued to wait patiently. An hour or so after the battle, the higher-class warriors finally left. They killed quite a number of monsters above grade 3, so it was quite a harvest. After that, it was the lower-class warriors' moment. It was not easy to find beast cores in lower-grade monsters because not all of them had one. Many warriors aimed for monsters that were graded, breaking open their skulls to try their luck. Some of the creatures were so badly burnt or decapitated that they could not tell their grades. That was how they did it. However, things were not as complicated for Yang Tian. Since he had Drago could detect the presence of beast cores even from afar. Yang Tian thought for a while before he came up with a theory there was most likely some kind of energy wave emitted by the beast cores, and Drago could sense it. Drago, I'll nudge the monsters later. If there's a beast core, just give me a little scratch to let me know, understand? Yang Tian opened up his shirt collar and asked. Squeak squeak squeak. Drago replied in agreement. Yang Tian smiled and started to nudge the corpses everywhere with his saber. Among the monster corpses, the majority were mutant wolves. There were also tigers, bears, panthers, cats, boars, and so on. These creatures were mostly carnivores before the virus outbreak. Some herbivores became omnivores after the mutation, while others still consumed grass and leaves as their main source of food. The latter was the main food source for the carnivorous monsters. However, one should not take the herbivorous mutants lightly, as these monsters were equally as strong and could not be killed by regular humans. Yang Tian held his Tang Dao in his hand, poking every corpse that he passed by while little Drago poked his head out of the shirt collar to look with his wide eyes. Although there were many monsters, they were mostly lower graders without beast cores. Yang Tian went through about 100 of them, but he did not hear a pip from his dragon. He was not anxious though. He continued his way toward the city wall where most of the dead monsters were. Warriors were everywhere and they all looked very busy. Every time they found graded monsters, they would break open their skulls excitedly. As a matter of fact, there was not much time left for the warriors. The city gate would open at 4 p.m. at the latest. The outside dwellers would be let out to clean up the monsters' corpses. The day coincided with very hot weather, so they could not leave the bodies exposed for too long or they would rot and stink. If they were taken while still fresh, they could make cured meat out of them to eat. As it was shown, every monster wave was a big harvest for most people. The outside dwellers could obtain large amounts of food, while the supermarkets in the city would sell cheap monsters' meat. There was a dead mutant boar. It was badly burnt with no fur left and only mushy skin could be seen. Its grade could not be recognized. Yang Tian knocked open its skull and churned its brain. A yellow-colored bolus appeared. Grade 2 Beast Core. Yang Tian did not expect to find a Grade 2 Beast Core. He held back his excitement and lowered himself to grab the Beast Core. He kept it in his pocket discreetly. As he was walking away, nobody was looking at him. Yang Tian knew very well not to show what he possessed. After the discovery of the Grade 2 Beast Core, his luck took a good turn. At 3:30 p.m., With Drago as his guide, he found 5 beast cores. All thanks to the little dragon. Yang Tian felt that the method he came up with was slightly foolish. If he were to keep up with it, finding 1 or 2 beast cores was probably the best he could do. Finally, when he was kneeled to tie his shoelaces, Drago poked half his body out of the shirt collar and pointed toward the front left. Right away, Yang Tian understood how inefficient his method was. Warriors outside the city, please take note. Please stop your activities at 4 p.m. sharp. The speakers on the city wall blasted an announcement. It had been a rule forged through the decades. Time was running out. Yang Tian was quite satisfied at that point. Joining the battle earned him 2 grade 2 beast cores, and adding the one he obtained by killing the tank lizard before, he already had 3 of them. Not to mention the 5 grade 1 beast cores that he acquired. Yang Tian did not plan to return to the city even though he had accomplished something. He wanted to train longer because it had only been a few days since he left Tianxiang City after all. Satisfied, he turned around and headed toward Huangqiu City. Gur gur gur. As Yang Tian passed by a severed monster's head, Drago made a series of deep grunts. He could hear the excitement from the little creature. Must be a beast core. Right then, Yang Tian squatted down to check on the halved monster's head. It was a panther, and its the fur had been burned to a crisp with only a few threads left behind its ears. A grade 3 golden panther. Yang Tian was buzzed with excitement. He turned the beast's head around, dipped his hand into its brain, and searched. A red-colored beast core appeared before his very eyes. A grade 3 beast core. He thought to himself. Yang Tian looked at it and took it right away. He slid the beast core into his pocket while standing up. Chapter 19, Enemies on a Narrow Path. Hold on a second, my brother. As Yang Tian was walking away from the field of corpses, a muscular man chased after him and called out. Yang Tian paused and turned around. The man stood in front of him, wearing a kind smile on his blood-stained face. Yang Tian looked at him vigilantly as he was not sure what he wanted from him. Hopefully not the beast cores he had. Thinking of which, he clutched onto his saber harder. Seeing Yang Tian's expression, the man waved his hand and said to him, "My brother, please don't take it wrongly. I just wanted to ask you, are you under an academy now?" "Nope," answered Yang Tian plainly. "That's great." The man shouted with a smile and said, "Let me introduce myself. I'm Zhao Wu, a Class 1 warrior from Tianwei Military Academy. I would like to invite you to join our school." Tianxiang City had 3 major military academies: Xinwei, Tianwei, and Yangwei Military Academy. Yang Tian had heard of Tianwei before. Apparently, being a transhuman was the minimum requirement to enter that academy. Well, Yang Tian hesitated because he had not thought of joining an academy. It was actually not a bad idea to join. One could use all their training equipment and study combat skills that were mad to their students, and one surely did not have to purchase the skills. Most importantly, one could often ask for advice from the academy's high-classed warriors, adding on to one's combat skills training experience. Seeing that Yang Tian was hesitating, Zhao Wu took out a business card from his pocket and passed it to him. "You can give me a call if you'd like. Tianwei Academy welcomes your presence anytime," said Zhao Wu, who then left. Yang Tian looked at the card. Tianwei Military Academy was printed in large, and below it was their phone number. He kept the card in his pocket and turned around. He saw 3 men ahead, walking in a triangle formation toward him. "Sun Yu." As soon as he identified one of them, Yang Tian frowned. He could not figure out why there were so many people noticing him that day. "How've you been, Yang Tian?" "We meet again," said Sun Yu, who was standing 5 meters from Yang Tian, scanning him from head to toe. Just then, the 2 men who came with Sun Yu stood to one side each and completely blocked Yang Tian's way. Yang Tian saw silver-colored pentagrams pinned on their chests and immediately knew that they were Class 1 warriors from inside the city. They were clad in leather armor with not much blood stains on them. It seemed like they did not join in the battle. Since they were in Class 1, Yang Tian was not afraid of them. Smiling, he said, "You blocked my way. What? Do you wanna fight?" Arrogantly, Sun Yu said, You think you're high up enough in standards to fight with us? You must have cheated your way in and pretended to be a warrior just to steal a beast core or two. Let me tell you what. Cut off your hand and you can leave. Otherwise, you can only choose to die." Upon hearing that, Yang Tian recalled how he was humiliated by Sun Yu after the academy evaluation the other day. He spat at Sun Yu's foot and said steadily, "You want my hand? Come and get it. But let me remind you this. This saber on mine doesn't discriminate, just in case it takes your lives. Oh, by the way, my warrior mate is recording everything you're saying and doing. I suppose your Shinwei Academy wouldn't be able to find fault with me, yes?" As Yang Tian spoke, the three noticed the saber in his hand. It was incredibly sharp, bone-white, shiny, and smooth on the surface. It was obvious that it was a YT alloy weapon. Looking at the saber, a trace of greed flashed in the eyes of the short-haired boy standing on Yang Tian's left side. Sun Yu did not believe that Yang Tian could become a warrior in the course of a few days. He thought that he must have gotten lucky to somehow get on the battlefield, and pick some dead warrior's weapon and warrior mate. 5e, cut off both his hands and the saber's yours. Sun Yu turned around after thinking for a second and told the short-haired boy. "Thank you, brother Sun." The boy grinned and thanked Sun Yu. He drew out a pair of alloy sabers from his waist and walked toward Yang Tian. It was the first time Yang Tian ever fought with a Class 1 warrior, so he strung up his nerves. The short-haired boy that Sun Yu called 5e walked toward Yang Tian, his pace getting increasingly faster. Just as he was within 3 feet from him, he suddenly gave a loud cry and charged toward him at full speed. Although Sun Yu told the boy that Yang Tian was just a layperson, he was still cautious enough to treat him as equal and kicked off his attack with a lethal move. The boy could see the will to kill in Sun Yu's eyes and knew full well that he was not going for his hands, but his life. That was how cunning Sun Yu was. He already had the mind to kill Yang Tian the other day at Shinwei Military Academy's entrance, but there were rules in the school, so he did not take action. As they were outside the city at the moment, things were different. They were out of jurisdiction of both the academy and the city. The boy was very fast. Yang Tian's sharp eyes, however, could make out every move he was making. As the short-haired boy was closing in, Yang Tian held the saber with both his hands and took one quick step back. Spinning his body, the weapon turned into a shining ring and crossed his opponent's neck. That was his weakness. In the blink of an eye, they moved past each other. Thud. As Yang Tian stood still, the boy fell to the ground, his head separated from his body, and blood gushing out of his severed neck. Yang Tian finished the boy with merely one move. He realized something then. It seemed like his ability was above a normal Class 1 warrior. He then recalled that he was first transmutated by Drago's Dragon Ball, and he also took a Grade 1 Beast Core after that. When he was learning Shadow Break, he could perform the entire set within a day. That was different from what the video tutorial told him. The demonstrating warrior said in the video that a normal warrior would need 3 months to master the set of skills. As it dawned on him, Yang Tian became more confident. However, he did not take Sun Yu and his other companion lightly. Sun Yu was shocked beyond words when he saw Yang Tian had ended 5e in just one move, and he could not help but take a step back. "Why don't you both come at me?" said Yang Tian calmly, grinning in disdain as he stared at Sun Yu and his companion, who was a strong young man with a tiger head tattooed on his arm. The two only reacted after they heard what he said. Sun Yu flashed a white pistol from behind his back. Not saying a word, he fired at Yang Tian. Blam! A gunshot sounded. Yang Tian already dodged the attack, and before Sun Yu could take another shot, he rushed to the right and attacked the tattooed young man. Many within the lower class warriors used guns as their primary weapon. The guns that they used, however, were specially designed and were a lot more powerful. The bullets they released could easily pierce through the skin of grade 1 and grade 2 monsters. Yang Tian did not expect to see Sun Yu using a pistol. He felt lucky that he had been watching his every move. Otherwise, he could have been shot. The advantage of using a gun was that it could save physical energy and attacks could be done from a distance. The disadvantage, however, was if the enemy moved very fast and perpetually, one had to be even faster to strike the opponent. Obviously, Sun Yu was not as fast as Yang Tian. Even though he drew his gun and pulled the trigger before he aimed at Yang Tian still dodged it. Blam! 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 Sun Yu kept shooting at Yang Tian, who was moving at lightning speed, but it seemed like Yang Tian had eyes behind his back as he fought the tattooed young man while dodging the bullets that flew at him at top speed. Yang Tian was extremely fast, and Sun Yu was getting worried for the safety of his tattooed friend. Chapter 20, Joining Tianwei Military Academy. The tattooed man used a foldable alloy saber with a thick body. Even Yang Tian's YT alloy saber could not easily break it. Clank clank clank. Yang Tian moved around swiftly. He was engaged in a fierce showdown with the tattooed man, as their weapons crashed into one another and ringed with rapid metallic noises. Yang Tian's showdown with Sun Yu and the tattooed young man attracted a group of warriors to stand around and watch. They were exclaiming in disbelief, impressed by the much smaller-sized Yang Tian, who was able to fight two Class 1 warriors at the same time. Zhao Wu, the Class 1 warrior who passed Yang Tian his business card, had excitement written all over his eyes as he turned to a young gentleman with long red hair next to him and said, "Xiaofei, that's the guy Yang Tian I was telling you about. He doesn't look older than 20 years old, but he's on a higher level than a Class 1 warrior. He's got a bright future ahead of him." The red-haired man nodded in agreement when Zhao Wu said that. "We've got to get him to join Tianwei Military Academy." At that very moment, Sun Yu ran out of bullets. Thud. Taking the opportunity when Sun Yu was changing into a loaded magazine, Yang Tian saved a bit of energy by pausing for a second. He sidestepped to dodge the tattooed man's attack, spun around, and took a stab with his Tang Dao. The blade went straight into his opponent's waist. The tattooed man was very fierce. He threw away his saber and took hold of Yang Tian's weapon that was lodged in his body. Yang Tian used all his might to pull his saber, which let out a hissing noise when the blade rubbed against the bones. It took him tremendous strength before he could draw the weapon out of his enemy's hand. Bam! Right then, Sun Yu took a shot. Yang Tian could not dodge the shot, and it struck his shoulder. The bullet punctured a hole in his shoulder and the immense momentum sent him flying backward. Thud! Yang Tian fell hard on the ground. Sun Yu sneered. He went up and aimed the barrel at Yang Tian while continuously pulling the trigger. Bam! 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 Yang Tian did not have a chance to stand back up. In great pain, he rolled around to avoid the bullets. Thud! Yang Tian could not move fast enough, and another bullet hit his left thigh. Coincidentally, Sun Yu finished another magazine. Yang Tian endured the pain and stood up with a flip of his body. He stomped the ground with his right leg and pounced at Sun Yu. The two of them were about 8 meters apart, just the right distance for Yang Tian to charge at Sun Yu. Sun Yu's swapping speed was incredibly fast. As Yang Tian was almost reaching him, he aimed his pistol at him and pulled the trigger. Blam! A bullet flew out of the barrel but was blocked by Yang Tian's blade. When he was about to take his second shot, he felt a cool wind on his wrist and lost his feeling of connection to his fingers. Yang Tian had cut off Sun Yu's gun-wielding hand. Twang! At that very instant, before Yang Tian's feet touched the ground, and before he could slit his weapon over Sun Yu's neck, a dagger flew over from somewhere and deflected his Tang Dao. The body of the blade swept right past Sun Yu's face. The strike was so powerful that Yang Tian's perlicube broke open, and his Tang Dao left his grip. Thud. Once again, Yang Tian fell hard on the ground, and the momentum sent him rolling quite a distance. Ah! Sun Yu cried in deep pain, holding onto his severed wrist. Even though Yang Tian could not kill him, slicing off his right hand meant that he would never be as agile as before even if he could put his hand back on. He was permanently crippled. I'm gonna kill you. I'll kill you. Sun Yun glared and screamed at Yang Tian who was on the ground. As for Yang Tian, he was only biting his teeth while pulling out the dagger from his waist with a sneer. Stop it! Just then, a middle-aged man who carried a huge saber on his back shouted and walked past the crowd of observers. Sun Yu saw him and yelled in relief, "Brother Joe." The man quickly went over to Sun Yu and said nonchalantly, "Why don't you pick your hand back up? There still might be a chance to reattach it." "But, what about this kid? I won't let this pass. I want to kill him," said Sun Yu, hatefully staring at Yang Tian. The man frowned. He looked at Yang Tian and told Sun Yu, "He killed one of our own from Xinwei Military Academy. He'll pay." Once he had spoken, he drew out his big saber from his back and walked toward Yang Tian. Yang Tian merely glared at him coldly. The energy on this man was undeniable. According to Yang Tian's judgment, he must have been above class 2. Yang Tian was not afraid of him because he had Drago. He believed that he could defeat him. He would not mind exposing Drago if it came to that. The 2 shots fired by Sun Yu did not hurt him fatally, as he was only bleeding. Can't fight long, he thought, I must finish this fast. Joe Dadeo, is this how you people from Xinwei Military Academy bully people? Said a red-haired young man who stood out from the crowd, his face betraying his feeling of disdain. The middle-aged man paused to look at the young man in long red hair, then said with a frown, "Xiao Fei of Tianwei Military Academy. I advise you not to interfere with our business. If not, when the 2 academies get into conflict, you wouldn't be able to handle it." Through their conversation, Yang Tian realized the name of the middle-aged man who wanted to take his life was Joe Dadeo 1, but he was not sure if it was his real name or just a nickname, and the red-haired young gentleman was Xiao Fei, from Tianwei Military Academy. Yang Tian could feel that the energy projected by Xiao Fei was comparable to Joe Dadeo's. They were probably both above class 3. As Joe Dadeo finished speaking, Xiao Fei laughed out loud, and said, "How can I not interfere? This boy is Yang Tian, one of our own from Tianwei Military Academy." "Impossible!" Sun Yu shouted as he heard Xiao Fei's words, "How could this kid have joined your school in a matter of days?" Xiao Fei crossed his arms and took a good look at Sun Yu, who was holding his severed wrist, and said in disgust, "Garbage like you are not up to our standards. Don't judge others with your low-life mind. You." Sun Yu glared at Xiao Fei and was so mad that he could not speak a word. "If you don't believe me, you can ask Yang Tian himself," said Xiao Fei, turning back to Joe Dadeo. Yang Tian did not say a word and only nodded with a smile. Humph. Joe Dadeo glanced at Yang Tian and Xiao Fei and left swiftly. "Yang Tian. One day, I'll make you regret that you're still alive." After threatening Yang Tian, Sun Yu picked up his cut-off hand and quickly ran toward the city wall. Xiao Fei went over to Yang Tian with a smile. He patted Yang Tian on his shoulder and said, "Yang Tian, perhaps you would have to agree to join us now. In an age of chaos, one man's strength is limited after all. If you join us, you can be protected by the academy. People would have to think twice before they get into any kind of trouble with you." Yang Tian nodded firmly and said, "All right. I'll join Tianwei Military Academy."
This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video. See you in the next one.